Welcome, everyone. I'm Scott Noons, and you're tuning in to Education Today. You can follow me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook at Mr. Noons Teach. I am so pumped for tonight. I know I say that all the time, but I'm especially pumped for tonight because we have Brandon Levine joining us. I'm going to give him the floor in just a moment, but we connected through identity automation and my good friend Jamie Donnelly, and he has just an amazing story. I don't want to give out any spoilers. I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Remember, if you're on YouTube and Twitter, you can comment, and I'll do my best to show those comments on the screen. There's our friend Jamie Donnelly. She's saying excited to hear Brandon's passion in education. Me too. We were chatting a bit before the show, and I'm even more excited. I'm feeling really humbled, super blessed, and I can't wait to share with y'all. And on Facebook, be sure to give StreamYard permission so that you can post and share, and then I can share it on the screen as well. And as Brandon and I are talking, if you have any questions during the broadcast, please drop them there, and I'll do my best to get those to Brandon. So Brandon, how are you tonight? How's everything going?
Going great, Scott. It's truly a pleasure, truly humbled to be here. Thank you for taking time out. Very excited about the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. And I want to make sure everybody pays attention there on the screen. They're following you on Twitter at Brandon underscore Levine 3. So make sure you're following Brandon. You can also find him on LinkedIn as well. Search him out. And Brandon, I'm just going to kind of let you steal the show here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And, where do you come from?
Absolutely. Brandon Levine, born and raised Dallas, Texas. I live here in Katy, Texas now, west of Houston. Let's see, I work for a company called Identity Automation. We are the digital identity platform for education. We're based out of Houston, Texas as well. That's how I was able to connect with Jamie. But yeah, no, very excited. And I'm so happy to be here.
No, I love it. So, what do you do there at Identity Automation?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm the director of sales development. So I basically work closely with school districts as well as higher ed institutions to get a better understanding of what they're looking to do from their identity and access management perspective, offer them a different solution as well as a way of thinking how that's changed, especially with, remote learning as well as hybrid learning being out there, and just help them understand that times have changed. As you saw recently, malicious actors or hackers as well, or I mean, man, they're really going after the K through 20 space as well. So we just want to let them know that hey, times have changed, right? Security is important. Delivering learning outcomes is even more important as well, and we look to partner with them to offer them a new way of addressing that.
Oh, that's great. You're absolutely right. Right. I looked at some map. I forget the name of the site. You think I would know being an ed tech coach. There's so much going in and out all the time. It's hard to keep track of everything. But there was a site I looked at, and you could see all of the different K-12 cyber attacks in the nation. And I was just blown away. And it had ones in my local area, and it had all of them. And then there were some I didn't know about. I was like, wow, this is a big deal.
It's mind blowing, right? Because this is something that I was having a conversation with someone earlier about. Hackers, they're really smart, and what I mean by that is they understand that if you're looking at whether it's a young person, a young student, or even an educator, right? They're using a lot of
Mhm.
applications, right? Oftentimes they're using the same the password for the different applications. Sometimes those passwords are used in personal life, so for things like Facebook, their Walmart account or things like that, and they're applying those same passwords to some of their learning resources, right? So to them, to a
Mhm.
hacker, it's like this is a gold mine, right? So you're seeing more ransomware attacks. You're seeing a lot of these educational entities, right, being held hostage, right, because they have their data, right, and they know that hey, if we offer this big ransom, right, there's a great chance we're going to get that money, and it's just it's changed so much, and yeah, we have to always be on our p's and q's for sure.
Yeah, way to see that need and really work full heartedly to address it. I want to tackle a couple comments that have come in. My buddy Glenn Irvin in the house. What up, Glenn? Maybe I got to talk to Glenn about getting me like some new theme music or something for the show. So think about that, Glenn. See if we can collab on that. Very talented musician. And then we have Linda Edwards dropping in saying hello. One of our uh, identity automation pathfinders, super cool. Such a great ambassador program. I really love what Jamie Donnelly's done there. And then Jamie's tuning in and saying she can't believe schools are paying ransoms. That's crazy. Like with the little pipeline hack, I know they tracked the cryptocurrency back, but they paid it, right? That's it. It just blows my mind. It feels like it really enables those individuals to just perpetuate what they're doing. What can we do to stop that in the field of education?
There's a lot of things, partnering with different ed tech vendors, but one thing internally, right, starts with education. Right. This is something I had a full training with my family. I have an aunt as well as an uncle who's older, and I let them know, hey, if you get a text message, right, for something that looks
Hmm.
suspicious or it looks a little fishy, right? Don't click those links, right? Which I know that sounds kind of cliche, but oftentimes, right, it really starts with education, because these hackers, right, they're very savvy, right? They know how to make things look legitimate, and so yeah.
Yeah, I've known some people that have been taken, and it wasn't like they weren't educated people either. Like they kind of knew about this stuff, but they still fell for it. So one was this is about 10 years ago. Um, an individual uh, paid this huge ransom, tons and tons of money. I think tens of thousands of dollars, because he got an email saying his grandson was stuck in South America and needed money and couldn't get back. And he just panicked and paid the money right away. Didn't even call the grandson, just paid it right away. Thankfully, he still had more money, but it was a good chunk of his life savings. He was retired, older, had just lost his daughter, the grandson's mom. It was all around this, just like tribulation, like in their lives, like they were really suffering. Then to add this, and so he had thought the grandson must have been mourning and kind of flipped out and went to South America, then got stuck because his mom had passed away, and they never got that money back. There was that, and then there's been plenty where uh, people have pretended to be other people, like professionals. So at my former school, we all got a text message saying, hey, this is your principal. I'm in a meeting. I need a gift card. I'll pay you back. And that's something we would all do. And most of us responded back, hey, is this really you? This isn't from your number. Why isn't it from your number? If you need it, I'll do it, but let me know that it's you. And she was like, no, no, don't do it. But three people did, and so they lost out. Thankfully it was only 25 bucks there, but it happens. And now at my church we just got one. Somebody was pretending to be the pastor and saying, hey, we need help with this missionary thing. If you can help and donate, great. And I don't know if anybody fell for that one, but here are people who genuinely want to give from the goodness of their hearts. And not only are they not being rewarded, but they're being greatly penalized. I'm concerned it's going to stop people from being people and being engaged in relationships.
It's tough, right? A lot of these malicious actors, they're heartless, right?
Mhm.
And then to your example, right? Not too many people are going to say no to the pastor, right? So they're really smart, right? As disguising themselves as coming across as legitimate, right? But they're very smart on who they're targeting as well.
Yeah. Yeah, do you have any idea how they, like, figure out, like, these targets? That was a new one. I hadn't heard about that at all. Like, how do they come up with this stuff?
Today is so easy to get um, first name, last name, email address. There's so many type of sites out there. Believe it or not, the dark web is a very dangerous place.
Mm,
There's so many different technologies where it's very easy to get. And then not only that, right? Just going and finding a church, seeing their website. All you need to do is see how their naming credentials are for like their email. So if it's like,
mhm.
first initial, last name at, the churchname.org, right? I just got to find a first and last name and I can easily just trial and error, send emails out, make it look legit. That's a very easy way. Like we can do an example of something like that, like right now. They're very smart, and it's tough when you hear stories like that. um, but yeah, it's not going to go away. Believe it or not, they're only going to get more sophisticated as each day go by.
I hear ya. Um, and as Jamie's commenting, yeah, we post our connections online. One thing I've stopped participating in and been very mindful of. I tend to do like a question of the day, and a lot of people like that, and I really enjoy it. I love when I open up my Twitter, I can respond and get answers to questions that are on my mind or that I've been talking to people about. Like, I'm definitely going to be doing a security one now after this. It totally fits, and I want people to be firmly aware that this is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Uh, and I've stopped answering like password type questions like, where did you first live? What's your favorite color? All those types of things, while they're completely innocent and they're super fun to do. These bad actors, they're just on it. And Jamie added, imagine if those bad actors were using their gifts for good. Amen to that, because uh, things would be much better instead of taking and tearing away. Imagine the good they could do with the smarts, with that ingenuity, because it takes something, and the persistence is there. I admire their persistence, that's for
Ab-
sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So, what can we do in the K-12 space? What is identity automation doing to help kind of um, protect that space? What are some of the offerings that um, they're they're sharing?
Absolutely. And not to make this a sales pitch or anything, but something that we're seeing, especially in huge shout out to our CEO, Jim Harold. He's been with the organization a little over a year now, and it was perfect timing. Because in the past, right, we were really focused on data and access management for all verticals, right? But when we noticed the shift what happened with the pandemic and really seeing how with remote learning or even hybrid learning the need for more security, right, by looking at each identity as an individual digital
Mhm.
identity, right, and protecting that, we made our shift as a company. Right. So not only in our technology, but in our full strategy. So some of the things that we're doing, right, is really importing different security measures into our platform, right? And also seeing that, to deliver these learning outcomes, right, we really need to personalize, that digital identity and really see that each identity should only have, the access that they need, right, to do their function. So for instance, right, different students, they shouldn't have access or the same resources as like a teacher, right? Because
Right.
going back to our analogy of how these malicious actors are targeting those different identities, right? You kind of want to stop the spread as much as you can, as early on as you can, right? So yeah, but it really starts with making sure that each identity has access to the resources that they need only to do their job, right? And
Right,
then
that makes so much sense, and having worked in different organizations, you don't want somebody messing with your stuff, like Google Docs and things, like, when you're sharing, like, "Hey, we gotta be careful," or uh, student work in general, what they might put. And I think it's really important. One thing I did when I was in the classroom was I really helped them carve out and create their digital identity and their digital brand, having that digital footprint, because it's forever, and giving them those basic skills. They were shocked. And I was an ELA teacher, so we would read a lot of articles associated with that, and they were amazed. And now with AI and machine learning, you can really scrape a lot of that data, and so you're not having to do it by hand. uh, these people, I imagine, are probably, at least some of them, really good at programming, and you can run simple scripts to look out for keywords and scrape some of that data, especially from social media or key documents, and really just wreak havoc with that. Or if you're using the same password for everything, you're just opening so many gates. They just have to keep trying different accounts and they'll get lucky.
Yeah, and then also, like when you look at like, education as a whole, right? There's a lot diverse identities, right? Not only with staff, students, but also like, contractors. Right. So you have all of
Mm-hmm.
these different identities, right, within your systems, right? So you gotta have to be really cautious because, this was one example that I can think of that I was speaking with a school district about. They gave a great analogy, but they was like, hey, Brandon, oftentimes we have different, vendors right on campus or utilizing our systems, right? And oftentimes, IT may reach out and say, hey, this vendor is going to be here for the week. They need access. So yeah, create an account for them. Okay, awesome. Right, that happens. But oftentimes, they never let someone know that they're no longer, utilizing their services, or that, that they're no longer doing the job that they were needed access to. So now you have a rogue account, someone who has access to all of your systems, right? And if someone gets a hold of that, they can do a lot of damage. So just putting things in place, time to live, right? Deprovisioning those accounts really goes a long way. It really goes a long way.
Yeah, I want to get to your story in terms of talking about identity. I think that's a good shift to kind of go back and talk about your story, because you have a profound story. And what really struck me when I was looking over the identity automation blog that had your story was I saw my students in you, and the teacher heart, that never really goes away. Even though I've been out of the classroom, I still feel for my students. I support 30,000 now instead of like the 200 when I was in the classroom. So that heart has kind of grown, just like when you have more and more children as a parent. And uh, I really want everybody to feel like they matter, and I want what's genuinely best for them. And you bring up some great points with digital equity within your story. Can you kind of start us at the beginning and let us know where you started and how you got to where you are now?
Absolutely, Scott. And we talk about security a lot, right? But at the end of the day, we got to talk about what's really important, and right, which is what these educators are doing on a daily basis, right? And that is teaching, right, changing lives. And oftentimes, we can talk about security, but when we really look at the life cycle of that student, right? It's tough because oftentimes, going back to when we were talking about how this shift has changed, right? We make a lot of generalizations. What that means is, yes, we can go to remote learning. Everyone has internet, right? It should be a quick, easy shift. When in reality, that's not the case, right? Looking back to my journey, growing up, in schools, especially in elementary, that was probably restricted. It was tough. Jamie asked me a powerful question. She said, Brandon, she said, think back to when you were in school and the pandemic happened. How would you have fared? And I said, Jamie, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. The reason why I don't know is because oftentimes, myself, looking back and other people like myself, they don't go home to a laptop. Sometimes they don't go home to two parent homes. Oftentimes, they're being raised by extended family members. Oftentimes, those family members may not have been educated. So if I need help with my homework, who's going to help me?
Right.
If I'm already struggling in the classroom, what's going to happen when I go home and I can't get a hold of my teacher? Oftentimes, it's really generic to where everyone has, access to like a tutor, internet, laptop, right? In some cases, even a meal, right? So going back to my story,
Mhm.
I was telling Jamie, just thinking back, right, on how different it was from elementary to middle school, right? So in elementary, it was your typical poverty-stricken, elementary school, right? Limited resources. Very grateful to every single teacher who had an impact, right? I turned 32 next week. I still remember my first grade teacher. I
Me
remember
too.
remember Miss Taylor, my second grade teacher, Miss Eastham, my third grade teacher, Miss Cummings, and just seeing how, you know, they motivated, right?
Mhm.
They inspired, right? And believe it or not, I did really well academically, but looking back on some of my classmates that didn't fare as well, right? For them to still invest into them to try to give them a chance with the limited resources that they had, I'm very grateful. Oftentimes, a lot of these students, they don't have pencils, they don't have papers. So a lot of teachers were having to use their own money to get supplies to just provide for those students. So just think about that for a second, Scott. So if I don't have access or the resources in class to be teed up for success, what happens when I'm going to go home?
Right. You're just doubling down on that, and it's just further accentuating that gap, right? And I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm guilty of that too, especially when I started out. I had no idea, and people had to tell me, "Hey, like, lighten up." I had no idea. I didn't come from a household that didn't have supports. My mom was very gifted academically, and so she was always there. And you talk about tutors. I mean, even to this day, I'm working on a book, and the best proofreader I have to this day is my mom. I still go to my mom, and I'm an English major. I'm the one with the degree, and I'm going to mom still. So I'm truly blessed in that regard. But you know, a lot of my students don't have that. And like you mentioned, they're having to be the parent and take on these roles. And one thing I wanted to also bring up, and I'm curious if this was your experience too. I I've gotten better at relationships with my students, but I know like those first couple of years, primarily my first year, really had a hard time getting through to students and having them kind of open up and share so that I was a little more aware. And I found, especially by the time they got to me in ninth, 10th grade, they were just done telling people their story. It wasn't worth it. They really didn't get the help. They didn't see the point. It just exacerbated the situation, and they were more annoyed than anything. Is that something you can relate to? And how, if so, how can teachers kind of do that better?
You know, and I'm glad you called that out because it's spot on. Usually early on, when they're younger, right? It's very close knit. What I mean by that is no one wants to say, hey, when I go home, my mom's not home because she's working two jobs, or
Hmm.
maybe my mom isn't home or my dad isn't home, right? It's very, or hey, the what I had for lunch yesterday was the only meal that I had, right? And because sometimes
Right, right.
it's really embarrassing. One thing I got to really call out, right? It's tough. Kids are mean, right? So sometimes there are classmates, right, who make fun. I remember, right? But the biggest things is I have two young kids, and my daughter Alani, she's the youngest. She's a year and a half, and I saw something that when I tell her something, sometimes it doesn't resonate.
Hmm.
When I show her something, she gets it. When I show her that I care, she gets it. She feels that. So applying that back, because you asked me, right? What can a lot of educators do? right? Oftentimes, the students hear, hey, you can be whatever you want to be, right? Have big dreams, right? Anything's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But when they see that you care, when they see the efforts that you're doing to go and above and beyond to make them feel special, that is what resonates, right?
Yeah.
When I think back on my middle school teacher, Mr. O, my algebra teacher, I'll never forget. He gave me a pair of UT Longhorn basketball shorts, right? And I know this is kind of a random story, but I share this story because it kind of ties it all together, right? Him doing that showed me that hey, it is possible to go to college because he went to UT Austin, right? But not only that, that was one of the first times a teacher actually gave me something of
Mm-hmm.
meaningful value to just say, hey, like it's possible. Like this is for you. I care, right? I remember like it was yesterday, right? I wish I still had the pair, right? I've probably outgrown it a lot, but but believe it or not, him and I
That's awesome.
we still stay in contact, right? And one thing that I'm really big on is really being a light to others, right? Because it's
Yes.
tough, right? It's tough if I'm a young mind. No one in my family went to college, right? How do I know that that is possible? Right. So, he was saying, absolutely, James. Yeah, he was saying that. And it really helped me pay it forward as well. Because sometimes, these young minds, they just need to see it. They just want to feel that
Yes.
someone care, someone believes in them, because oftentimes they're not getting that at home. It's very easy to generalize that and to assume that everyone is going home to that, and they're not.
Right. And I just want to add to that because that story um, kind of dovetails with one I had where I had this student who was just grumpy all the time, couldn't motivate this student to do anything. And I felt for the student and I knew there was more there. I saw the student's artwork, like, hey, this student has some talent. I want to support that talent. Like, who cares about the ELA stuff I'm doing? Because if the students don't matter, the standards don't matter. Like, the students come first. And so, very much like what Mr. O did for you, I had a 3D printer in the classroom, and the student seemed to be interested and was like, "Oh, before my dad went away to jail, her dad was on trial um, for a crime, a pretty serious one." And I said, "Oh, do you want me to print you something? What do you want?" And she's like, "Oh, just print me one of those eggs." And after that, the whole landscape changed. The whole relationship with that student changed. And it was an instant 180. And that student, treasured that little 3D printed egg. Only took me like 45 minutes to print. It wasn't a huge investment, but it was that thought. It was because I cared. And I think that's the most important thing. And especially right now, because things are so messy and they're out of our control and teachers are spent. But if you could just show up as an educator, as an admin, as a professional, anybody that volunteers, gives back, works with children, just be present and do all you can when you're there. Show up and give your all. And Jamie's saying, yeah, because you heard her story. And I did. And this wasn't at the beginning of the year. This was like at the towards the end. This is like January that this happened. I've been working for all of these months and it was miserable. Not going to sugarcoat it. That was a tough student. And that student was not kind to me whatsoever and had some pretty harsh remarks to say. But they turned that around and that made all the difference. I was like, okay, I'm doubling down. I'm doing this all the time, every year. And it led to more success stories like that. So right now in your story, we're in junior high. What else happened? Can you share about what changed from the type of school you went to for elementary and where you went in middle school?
That great segue. So, we talked about elementary. So, I got a chance, made really great grades in elementary. Had the opportunity to attend a gifted and talented magnet program for middle school. You had to go through like an application process, things like that. It was in Midtown, right? So much nicer
Mhm.
area. No longer, out, in the urban communities and things like that. And Scott, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. It was totally different. I was blown away. When I mean by blown away, right? Just looking at some of my classmates, right? Just seeing that, hey, I got to take a school bus to school, but also I saw a lot of my classmates, right? Parents driving luxury cars, and having different resources like tutors, right? Having their own computers. And I never forget, I shared this story with Jamie. But one time when it came to lunch, I was on free lunch. So there was like a board in the front of the cafeteria, and it had, the very few free lunch cards up there, but you had to walk up, get your card, and then go through the lunch line, right? And I'm going through getting my free lunch, something that I'm very used to. And then I'm seeing my classmates, like some were looking at me like, because they're bringing their own lunch, right? They have it all packed. And I was blown away because that was not often the case, especially when I saw it in elementary. And then not only that, just seeing how the curriculum changed as well, a lot different. Right, it was more personalized, more tailored, more advanced. Which was, I get it, right? It was part. It was a gifted and talented, but I had to raise my game. Right, that was
Yeah,
the first. That was the first time in my life I ever made lower than a B. Right, the curriculum was tougher, and which it was really good. It was really good. I'm connected with a lot of my former classmates on LinkedIn as well as Facebook, and a lot of them turned out to be highly successful. And I see why, right? Just because growing up, right, the learning that they were exposed to was a lot different, Scott, than a
right.
lot of the learnings from the inner cities, for sure.
Let me interject for a moment. Brandon, what I imagine their expectations were higher. What were expectations for you at home? I know when we were preparing for the show, your grandma had some wisdom and really emphasized education. Like what was it like that? What kind of support, I guess, did you get?
It was so my grandmother, she was born in 1932, right? So she only had a second grade education. But something that she really instilled into her grandchildren was, there's one thing that they can't take from you. There's one thing that no one can take from you, and that is education. So she was very tough on us, and I'm so grateful for that. I remember during the summer times, right? Before we could go outside and play, she would say, go grab a book. She had a bookshelf, and she'll say, read a chapter, read two chapters before you can go and play. She was really tough on us because she told us, she was like, Brandon, I get it, right? Sometimes life is going to be hard, right? But education is important. She was really. I shared the story with Jamie because I laughed, but I remember she was like, "Hey, if you bring home A's or B's on your report card, right, we're going to go to Burger King." And I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember, Scott, but remember back then Burger King had the little
The hat?
crowns, yeah. And I'm laughing, but that was our reward, right? And it wasn't really about the value, but it now, me being a parent, I really see now the importance of, I'm not gonna say incentivizing, but like making it fun, but really pushing the importance of a good education and making good grades as well.
Yeah, it really does matter. And you mentioned having kids, having my own children. When things get tough, when there's a challenge, I'm like, you just gotta push past it. I know it's tough, but if you push past it now, you're gonna have more opportunity later, less barriers when you get out there in the real world, and you'll be able to elevate yourself more seamlessly. And I try to showcase, like, hey, here's what daddy's doing. Daddy's taking this call, or yeah, daddy's taking this time away, but here's what I'm doing. I didn't do that. I failed a lot because even though my mom was academically gifted, she didn't graduate college until later. And on my dad's side, I'm the first person that I know of to get a 4-year degree. There might be one like second cousin, but I think that's it. Now other people have kind of done that, but I was the first one to do that, and that was a big deal. We're talking a lot of people. My grandmother on that side came from 9 children, so really sizable family. I have to laugh here in the comments. Jamie added the crown. I'm going to add too. I went to Burger King not too long ago and I actually asked for the crown. They still got them and I wore it. That's a big deal. It never goes away. It still has the same effect. And Linda says, if someone doesn't show they value learning, kids don't value it. That's absolutely true. How
That's
did
spot on.
that kind of shift when you went back to high school?
So it was different because after 7th and 8th grade, that was I only had 2 years at the center. I had to go back to my zone high school, which was back in the inner cities, mind you, right? Night and day. It was a lot different.
Mhm.
And I was blown away. Very fortunate to graduate top 4 in my class, but it
Wow.
really hit me, right? Where would I have been if I didn't have that experience? What happens to the students who don't get that type of opportunity, right? What happens when
Absolutely.
the young minds don't have access to those resources to be successful in the first place, right? What happens to the people who don't have someone pushing them to take homework serious, school serious, right? And it's tough. It's really tough. It was a lot different. I'll never forget when I graduated, the top 5 people who graduated, they got a gift, which was a laptop. It was a laptop, but the laptop was a refurbished Dell laptop, right? I think they were donated to the school, and it made me think. Mind you, I was very grateful. I think I still have it
Nice.
today in my garage, right?
That's cool.
But one thing I can tell you for sure, right? When some of the schools in the suburban areas, I can assure you that they may not be getting the people who graduate top 5 a refurbished laptop, right? So it's a lot different, right? Which is why I'm really passionate about closing that educational equity gap that exists, because it's definitely there. Sometimes it's difficult conversations, right? But
Absolutely.
but but all it takes is really raising that awareness, and I'm very grateful for the teachers as well as the educators who played a critical role, right? Who didn't see me as that young African American male, but they saw the potential and they dedicated their time. I'm forever grateful because it plays a critical key in our development for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious. You mentioned those that encouraged. For me, it was the opposite that encouraged me. It was the people telling me no, especially in
Mm.
college. I did fine in high school. I kind of just cruised by, got by on my smarts. I have a really good memory. It's kind of since gone, but I used to just kind of remember everything, and so it was fine as long as it was rote memorization. I was good. And then I was decent at essays because I had my mom. Like, hey, mom, can you proofread this? And she's like marking it up. Like, oh man, I gotta retype this. Okay. But I would do well. Um, but I remember one of my professors who was also my academic advisor, and he said, you know what? You're not cut out for this. You should think of something else.
Mm.
I don't know about college, definitely not English. You shouldn't be an English major. You're never going to graduate. And then that made me just double down my efforts. And I had failed 2 of his classes, or actually 3. Now that I'm thinking about it, this guy taught like everything I wanted to do, and I got stuck with him for one of my main classes. I couldn't like get out of it. Nobody else taught that class. I couldn't take the class anywhere else because it was one of my senior level classes. I'm like, what am I going to do? I got this guy. Oh no. And so I just pulled out all the stops. I started dressing super nice, right? and just doing what all the other kids did, always raising my hand, going to office hours,
Yes.
pulling up commentary. I'm like, okay, let me not just read Shakespeare. Let me pull up all the commentary on Shakespeare, and I'm regurgitating that and weaving it in. And then I had either the top or the second highest grade in that class. And I was just amazed. That was like amazing. That was the hardest I ever worked, and it meant so much. And, his heart softened. I don't even know if he, meant to say what he said. Um, but we ended on good terms, thankfully, but that's what motivated me. And it was that type of teacher that motivated me to do well and to get into college and to then go into teaching, because I never wanted that teacher for students. When I realized, like, hey, I have an opportunity to be better
Mhm.
than those teachers. Maybe I won't be the amazing teacher that everybody talks about, but if I can take up space here and kind of share my wisdom on top of the academic things I'm teaching, that's going to be it. And that really served me so well. Even though I love what I'm doing in the ed
Mhm.
tech space, oh, I miss having the conversations with students and seeing their minds develop and grow and seeing them grow in maturity. See it a lot with freshmen, especially like from the start to the end of the freshman year, they're completely new kids. And then when they come back senior year and they're like way taller than you and they started out and they were at your chin, it's the best. It's absolutely the best. I'm going to look at these comments here. Jamie adds, when you have confidence, you'll be challenged by the naysayers. Absolutely. But when you don't have the constant positive reinforcement, those negative words could break you. Amen to that, because that's what happened to me in graphic design. So that also happened. Just the naysayers all the time. I used to be a graphic designer. I started when I was 12, had my own business when I was 14,
Nice.
and definitely so many naysayers. You're not going to do well. You should do something else. And yeah, I failed at it horribly. And in fact, in my book, I'm going to be talking a lot about that. I got a whole chapter dedicated to all my numerous fails, but I feel inspired. I just heard his first name's escaping me, but the Dyson guy, the guy who created the vacuum,
Mm.
he had like 5,000 some prototypes before he came up with that kind of final model. It just blows my mind. So I'm doubling down. And Linda adds, unfortunately, teachers don't realize how much power they have for good or bad. You mentioned something that really stuck with me. You said to be a light. With my very first teacher conference, Ernie Hudson was one of the keynotes, and he moved me so much. And I always remember that. He said, you have such an opportunity to be a light in the lives of these children. He equated education to being in a dark room with a chair, and there's nothing bad in the room, but if you can't see, you don't know, and it's very scary. But as teachers, you can be the light. And so he talked about his story. He talked about his son's story, which was very moving. His son just had so much abuse in the school
Mm.
system, public, private, everything. And it was just a horrible experience, and is still suffering from that today. And I thought, wow, for him to share that, this is like a movie star. He doesn't need to share that. He shared it because he believes and he loves educators and loves people. He wants us to be genuinely good and to make a difference. And so that profoundly stuck with me to where I remember it all these years later. Um, what kind of advice would you have for all the educators out there who are tuning in and maybe still wondering, what to do or where to go during these tough times?
Something that comes to mind is, be the voice for the voiceless. Mind you, I know that kind of sounds cliche, right? But oftentimes when we're talking about, being that light, right?
Mm.
Usually it's geared towards our most gifted students, right? Our students who
Yes,
are who's more likely to be successful, right? Without realizing the ones that may be falling behind because of circumstance or different things like that, right? They can still be very um they still deserve that same, you know like that same care, right? They really deserve
absolutely.
they really deserve that. I will never forget my ninth grade English teacher, Miss Pollard. Remember like it was yesterday. She said, Brandon, flowers can grow out of mud. And I said, Miss Pollard, like what do you mean? She said, Brandon, some of the most beautiful things in life come from some of the worst situations. So with that said, right, when we're looking at when you ask me the question, right, just keep in mind, right, that all students deserve that. They deserve that same care, right? They deserve that same personalization, that same attention, right? It doesn't matter their race, their background, their income status, their location. They deserve that same time and attention because they're going to remember, right? They want a chance, right? And
Mhm.
they're our future, right? So yeah, that's some of the advice that I would give, Scott.
Oh, I think that's great advice. And backing up to what Linda said, I'll put it back here on the screen. Teachers don't realize how much power they have for good or bad. We started with those bad characters, right? What if they had used it for good? Same thing for teachers. And teachers have big hearts. And now it's more challenging than ever. I hear from tons of teachers every day, whether it be from my district or via social media. They are hurting so much. They're so fatigued. The students are hurting. The admin are hurting. The system is under so much pressure. And I love how identity automation has really thrown down the gauntlet, to borrow from Jim Harold, and thrown down and said, hey, we're here to be an ally. How can we help? And they're looking to serve. That has been tremendous. And I absolutely love the Pathfinders. Such a great program. Top level community. I learn so much from that community. Um, that it's something I don't ever want to let go of. My community matters to me so much, and they've gotten me through this very difficult time. Anything I've been able to do in education has really been due to the support of my family, my faith in God, and my community. Those three pillars are everything. And if you kicked out one of those, toast,
Those
toast. I would be miserable.
those are three strong pillars. That is a strong foundation, and I agree 100%, Scott, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brandon. I want to make sure everybody's following you on Twitter at Brandon_Levine 3 and on LinkedIn as well. And where can they find the stuff that you're doing with identity automation, and how can they inquire about fulfilling their security needs?
Absolutely. Please check out our website, identityautomation.com. Check us out on LinkedIn as well. Please give us a follow. We share a lot of great content that is very meaningful to the education as a whole. We give great insights, different data sheets, ebooks, different blogs as well. Also, I'm going to be out in Philly next week. There's a big
Ooh.
higher ed conference called EduCalls. So if there's anyone that's tuning in today that's out in the area, would love to connect and meet. So yeah,
No, that would be awesome. I always love connecting. Next time I'm at some in-person conference, I hope we can connect in real life. I just want to throw this up. Jamie Sharon, Identity Automation is so blessed to have you, Brandon. And definitely, I'm glad that we're connecting too. And Jamie's too kind, and she says to have me as part of the Pathfinder community. I think I get more out of the community than y'all get from me, but I'll take it. I'll take it. And I definitely want to add that identity automation is the digital identity platform for education, and I just see it growing. I think there's so much potential out there, and I'm excited to see what happens next in your journey and in their journey as well. Thank you so much, Brandon. Appreciate you.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much, Scott.